Hello, it's Scott Manley here. Now, if you've been paying attention to my Twitter feed, you'll know that I was at a special early press screening of the much anticipated Interstellar last night. This was something of a fundraiser, awareness raiser for the B612 Foundation in collaboration with Lockheed Martin. So we had a lot of real, hardcore geeks there, and we had Ed Liu was there representing B612. But yeah, this was a really interesting event because it was shown a day early and it was shown on IMAX. And I haven't seen many movies on IMAX, but I'll tell you right away, if you're going to see Interstellar, absolutely consider the IMAX version. It's available as a 70mm and a 35mm version. And the 70mm is obviously the best. It really speaks to Christopher Nolan's credentials as an A-list director, that he was able to get a studio to back a 3-hour science fiction epic and let him make it on 70mm film to get the best experience. This is really his 2001. Christopher Nolan, he does obviously the last 3 Batman movies. He does Memento, Prestige, Inception, obviously. And you can see where he's coming from. He's a cerebral action director. And so it is like 2001 with a lot of talk and quite a bit of action and some amazing visuals and sounds. And I will say that this was the loudest movie I think I've ever seen. Experienced, I think, is more the word. When the rockets are taking off, the volume is so loud, it was literally shaking the walls of the theatre here. I asked Ed Liu afterwards whether it was as loud as being in the space shuttle during launch, and he said no, it was louder. Of course, it wasn't as loud as a Chelyabinsk meteorite, which is why you should be interested in backing the B612 Foundation, because they are all about saving the world from killer asteroids. However, the movie is all about saving the world from another type of catastrophe. It goes to the near future. The Earth is essentially dying due to ecological failures. The crop yields are dropping. There's a blight which is literally killing off whole species of plants. Everybody is getting trained to be farmers to feed everyone, and the schools have even stopped teaching things like the Apollo program. There's a whole sequence, and spoilers, by the way, spoilers coming up, where they explain that the textbooks say that the Apollo program was in fact a hoax to help bankrupt the Soviet Union. Of course, Cooper, our protagonist, played by Matthew McConaughey, knows different and won't have any of it. And yes, he through a series of mysterious events, he is led to a secret location where they are in fact planning a mission to take humans off this planet and to other stars. And right away, we establish that this is a slightly smarter than your average sci-fi film, because the protagonist says, but that's impossible. Mars and Venus aren't habitable, and the nearest stars are thousands of years away. We don't have that kind of time. There has been a mysterious wormhole which has appeared near Saturn, and that is being used to explore potential planets nearby, but we have time for one last mission before we have to decide where to go. And of course, our protagonist, Cooper, is a former test pilot and therefore well equipped to go. So yes, for various reasons, he becomes the captain of this mission along with a crew of scientists and a couple of robots who are look like they've been built in Minecraft. They are actually some of the best characters in the movie, if you ask me. They go off and start to investigate various worlds. We find an epic world sitting right on the very lip of a black hole, which has waves the size of mountains, and time dilation, which means that they spend every hour they spend on the surface is years back home. And of course, this leads to one of the fundamental themes of the movie is about time and space, and how Cooper has gone off and left his family behind, and while he is dealing with these extreme space-time forces and configurations, time is passing much more slowly for him, and his family grows up and more or less abandons him to a certain extent. The people behind the mission also get old, and problems are left unsolved. The fundamental problem of how to bring people away from the Earth remains unsolved because the scientist dies. Now, we then continue. We go up to other potential worlds. There's some epic action sequences, some dubious physics, and a lot of the time the movie feels a little uneven. I'm not sure we really need the amount of time spent back on Earth, because we're really interested in what's going on in deep space. But Christopher Nolan does like to kind of build up his climaxes, have them happening simultaneously, and I'm not sure that it necessarily works here. I think we'd be much more interested in watching the astronauts do their thing. But regardless, we get this. The plan B goes off to one direction. Plan A basically boils down to the protagonist taking a leap of faith and essentially transcending space-time and giving the people on Earth the way to save themselves ultimately. So it is very much 2001, right? And everyone should have watched 2001 by now. It is a classic movie, even if it is a little slow. I think that visually this movie is absolutely stunning. The pseudoscience is a little weak in places, and there are just straight up impossible orbital maneuvers, right? For example, if there is a planet spinning around a black hole such that every hour on it is years outside of the black hole, sure, you can swing by that, but the problem is you will be going at a near escape velocity, and arresting that escape velocity takes, it's like slowing down from the speed of light. So that maneuver is impossible, right? They could have rewritten the movie perhaps to accommodate for this. That it's a major plot point that they have a limited amount of fuel, so they can only visit a certain number of locations. But if you're able to cancel enough velocity to match orbits with a planet spinning around the lip of a black hole, then you have enough fuel to go practically anywhere, right? Not barring time dilation and things like that. They could have probably come up with some, wormhole argument that there was more than one wormhole, and the wormholes have different time factors and things like that. You have this situation where there's a spacecraft in orbit and it suffers a catastrophic failure and mysteriously starts falling out of orbit, which doesn't make any sense. As we know, objects in orbit will tend to stay in orbit even if they have a major accident. Then there's a daring maneuver to, of course, save this and pull it back into orbit. But then mysteriously, once they pull it back into orbit, it somehow achieves escape velocity and starts falling into the black hole again. Once again, if you can get that, then you've got ridiculous delta V's available to you. It doesn't necessarily make any sense, but of course, as a set piece, it looks great, and most people in the audience won't notice this or care. They're going to be more interested in the higher discussion of survival in this galaxy and things like that. And the space technology is very, very clinical, and I kind of like the designs of the spaceships and everything, although they do look like spaceships from Elite, so I imagine there will be certain hardcore Star Citizen fanboys who won't be so happy and will describe it as looking like a cheese wedge. It is a cheese wedge sitting on top of a Saturn V rocket early in the movie, which does seem kind of weird. No, I think the movie is a B+, or B, no, I think it's definitely not as good as many of Christopher Nolan's films. It certainly suffers from for me, it suffers from the science being a little dubious, and for people that aren't hardcore scientists, they might find some of the more intellectual statements to be less interesting. So I guess I'm kind of on the cusp. I'm falling into the uncanny valley, perhaps, where it's like, that's all wrong, right? But people that are just before that, they're going to love large parts of this. They're going to say, get on with it during the fourth repetition of do not go softly into that good night, or gently, or whatever. Dylan Thomas. there's definitely a lot of scenes where we felt, oh, like, get on with it, come on, we get the idea, right? Christopher Nolan, great director, but he does like to repeat the same themes over and over again. I think it might be up for some Oscars for visual effects, and certainly the sound was so staggeringly loud. It actually drowned out some of the dialogue in places, but I'm not sure if that was a theatre or that was the intent. After all, astronauts trying to shout across a spacecraft cabin during launch probably can't hear each other. So maybe that was intentional, maybe not, but I thought it was great. I enjoyed it. I'll probably take it. I'll probably go and see it again. Not sure it's a kids' movie. It is far too long for young ones. Score, I like the music. Hans Zimmer did a great job on the score. So yeah, Interstellar. It's out today and tomorrow on IMAX and on general release from Thursday. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.